Thank you so much for joining me today. It's the day before Christmas, the day before Christmas Eve, that is, when Santa delivers his presents using all of the reindeer, including Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. So we are going to draw Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer today, and I'm going to talk about reindeer in real life. So you're going to learn a little bit about where they live and what they look like. Then at the end, I'll tell you about my online course called Sketching Mammals of the World, which has a much more detailed drawing demonstration and a slideshow presentation on the biology of reindeer. And you'll also get to learn to draw other reindeers like this one, because every year I do a demonstration on how to draw reindeers. But today we're going to draw this one. So we're going to first make it realistic, and then we're going to add his Rudolph the Red-Nosed glowing nose, and then his harness for pulling the sled. Okay, how does that sound? All righty. So let me make sure, yep, we're live over there. Okay, good. So all you need is a pencil. And even if you don't have a pencil, that's okay. You can just watch and follow along. And then, yeah, and I am going to add a little bit of red and green at the end for the nose and for his harness for pulling the sled. Okay. And I'm going to play this a little bit slower than I filmed it so that you can follow along more easily. Okay. And then, yeah, like I said, at the end, I'll tell you about where was it? Here it is. I'm just trying to get this loaded here. Yeah. Where can I put that? I'm going to put a link. I'm going to put a link, and I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but I'm going to put a link where later on you can go over to my website and you can download this high resolution image of our reindeer. Okay. But anyway, you can follow along now. Okay. So let's get started. Like I said, I'm going to talk about the biology of real reindeer a bit as we're drawing them, okay? So we're going to first talk about the antlers and see the proportion of the antlers and the face and the neck and the shoulder and the belly and the hips. And then the four legs. This reindeer is running, and he's actually, or she is actually running on the tundra. In this picture, it's not quite winter yet. They do live in the far north where there's tundra. So first, we're going to just look at the proportion of the antlers. Reindeer have smaller antlers than their wild cousins, the caribou. And so that's just going to be in this area. So like I said, I'm just kind of blocking this in. You're not necessarily supposed to see this yet. We're just chatting. Then there's this mouth and the head, and it's kind of like a square or a triangle a little bit. So they have a really kind of squared off snout, and then a big jaw for chewing all that food they eat. So we're just basically looking at each of these parts before we start drawing. Then they've got a pretty short, stout neck. And in the males, they have a big dewlap. And this is a female, so she's got smaller antlers and no dewlap. And then the body is kind of really boxy, if you notice. It doesn't have like a good back for riding it like a horse, although they are ridden. So I'm just kind of showing where that very light box, sort of like a rectangle, is going to be. And then looking at the shoulder, they do have withers like a horse that the saddle sits on. So that is the top of their shoulder. And of course, that connects with the front legs, just like in our body, our shoulders and our arms. And you can see one leg is going forward. Its left leg is the one going forward, and the right leg is bent. And then back to the hips, those legs, the left and right leg, again, he's running or she is running, and so the legs are quite far apart. And that back right leg is really stretched out. Now I'm just going to show where the tundra is going to be. Again, this female, she's running along the tundra because they live in the far north of Europe, where the native folks raise them. And they use them for not only pulling sleds like Santa, but also for milk and meat and their fur. Okay, so now starting with actual drawing, again, we're going to kind of box in the proportions, and we're going to start with those antlers. And you can see there's kind of four prongs to the antlers, but they really vary, so you don't have to be exact at all. I'm not going to be. I'm just going to draw four prongs, and those often will fork as well, especially in the larger males. And of course, if this was a wild caribou, they'd have much bigger antlers, about twice as big. Now, only the members of the deer family, like reindeer and caribou and moose and elk, have antlers. And those fall off each year compared to other animals that look a little bit like them, like, say, African gazelles. They have horns that they grow their whole life. But these guys have antlers, and they fall off every year. This female here, she will keep her antlers throughout the winter. And if you've ever seen pictures or cartoons of Santa's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, they call him a boy, Rudolph, but he would actually be a girl if he had his antlers on during the winter, because only the females keep their antlers during all winter. And so, and they are the only species in the deer family that has females that have antlers. And those antlers are for protection and also for helping them dig into the snow to uncover food like mosses and lichens. So now we're going to move on to the head. And like I said, it's kind of boxy. And the snout is kind of squared off. We're just going to show that sort of triangle. And then there's sort of a circle for the jaw. That jaw is used for chewing. They're going to eat mosses and herbs and ferns and grass and tender leaves like willows and birches. In the winter, they'll eat lichens, which they're the only mammals that can actually metabolize lichen. And they also eat fungi. Now, they've got to have an ear for hearing for predators. They do have predators in the wild like wolves. And so I put an ear on there, and then I'm adding the right ear, which is behind the antlers. It's farther away from us than the antler. Okay, so then we're going to add the eye, and we've got to have a little bit of an eyebrow there. So we're going to have a little arch, and then coming down to the nose. And so we'll add an eye. Now, these guys live where there's really long, dark winters. In fact, several months of the year, the sun doesn't come up at all. So they can see in the UV range. So now onto the nostrils and the snout. It's actually covered in fur, and that's very unique among a deer. It's the only deer that has fur covering its snout, again, probably to keep it warm while it's looking under the snow for its food. Then the mouth and the chin, they've got kind of a flat chin, not as big of a chin as like a horse. And then the jaw. They can smell the lichen through the snow with their very sensitive nose. And they also use that nose to check for the scent of other animals that are left behind. They also actually have scent glands on their head. So they'll rub trees and shrubs to put that scent of that individual on the ground to mark their territory. Okay, so now let's add their neck. They've got a pretty short, stout neck. It's pretty wide and short. And I'm just kind of double checking my photo and my drawing. Oh, hello, Gail. Thanks for joining us today. I'll be at the end sharing if people want to share after they follow along. So I'll be sharing your faces if you want to join in. Okay, so anyway, let's do the neck. And again, I'm kind of double checking because sometimes we want to draw things differently than they actually are. And so this neck is really thick. And it, like I said before, if this was a male, he'd have a thicker lower neck with a dewlap, it's called. Now we're going to notice the shoulder, just like our shoulder blades. They have a shoulder, which is attached to their arms. And so the top of the shoulder, like here, that's the withers, like the withers in a horse that the saddle sits on. So we see that bump there. And noticing that arm. Now that front arm or leg, the left one is actually the one that's closest to us is actually the one that's curved and going back. So we're going to draw that one first. It's a little bit hard to see in the photograph, especially since these guys are so darkly colored. But in the photograph on the link I gave you in the comments, you can download that and see that better. So you can see I just drew the elbow, which is kind of tucked up against the belly. And now I'm drawing the leg that's bent and going backwards. And that's technically, that bend is technically actually the wrist. And we're just going to block it in now and make it a little bit more realistic later. And we'll talk about their feet later. They're a cloven-hoofed animal. Okay, now that other leg that's pushing forward, and that is actually the right leg. So that's sort of behind the line of the neck. And noticing how far it's pushing forward, it's kind of vertically or horizontally below the jaw. So we're going to make that kind of a big rectangle pushing forward. Again, this animal looks like it's trotting quickly. And there's the wrist, basically, what would be analogous to our wrist, and then down into the cloven hoof. And so the hooves are pretty much hidden in the grass. Again, these guys live in the far north in Norway and Finland and Russia. So now we're doing the belly. And again, like I said before, you can see this animal. These guys are really boxy. So just kind of think of a big rectangle there. And how the line of the neck continues on to the belly. And I'm just sort of double checking. And you can see that the depth of the belly is about the same length as the length of the legs. Different kinds of deer and members of the deer and cattle family will have different lengths relatively. Or so, for example, a giraffe would have really, really, really long legs compared to its body, whereas something else like a rhinoceros would have very short, stout legs. So then just looking at the belly, we've got that kind of square rectangular belly. Then we're going to add the hips. So just like us, they have hips. They've got a short tail. It's a fuzzy white tail. and kind of just like a white-tailed deer, and that white tail and rump helps them see each other, especially in the dark at night and in the wintertime to keep the herds together. And looking at this leg, we're going to draw this left leg first, which is the closer one. And we're thinking of that hip, and right there is the knee right there is kind of tucked into the belly, just like I mentioned the elbow is sort of tucked into the belly. And this is reaching forward. And then we have the angle of the ankle. So we're going to bend forward towards that other front left foot. And they're basically almost touching. And that back left foot is standing on the ground, and the front left is sort of lifted because it's running. So now I'm drawing that angle of the ankle as it comes down into the cloven hoof, which again is sort of hidden in the grass. And then the last part we're going to block in is that right rear leg. I'm kind of just depicting that white rump there. Like I said, is important for communication so that they can see each other in the herd, especially at night and in the dark of winter. And now we've got that leg pushing back. And so it's going at an angle back towards the right bottom side of the page. And it does have an angle of the ankle, but not as much as the left rear leg because it's not bent, it's straight. Now we can see this negative shape between the back legs. It's kind of a triangle. And then that back leg pushing with its hoof. And those hooves are mostly going to be covered in the sedges and grasses. Now I'm just outlining that cute white rump there. And they can raise and lower their tail when they're excited, scared. Now I'm just going to draw that arch of the sedges and rushes and grasses. That's the same thing they eat. Of course, in the summertime, it's a little bit easier when they've got 24 hours of daylight for a few months during the summer. But in the winter, again, that's going to be all covered with snow, and they're going to be able to need to use their antlers to dig out the snow and be able to eat the grasses and sedges and lichens and fungi that are hidden under there. Okay, so I'm just letting you catch up a bit. I hope you're following along. Again, I did put a link in the chat box where you can go to my website, christineelder.com/reindeer sketching tutorial, where you can actually download this high resolution image, as well as a bunch of other images of reindeers to practice sketching. And so we're just kind of looking at what we have so far. And now we're going to go back and firm up our lines. So we're going to look at those antlers first. Again, deer are the only animals that have these antlers that fall off every year. So they regrow them and fall off. So they're really living structures. And when they're first growing, they're covered by this type of skin called velvet. And they rub it off. You may have seen this on trees if you live someplace where like a regular white-tailed deer or a mule deer lives. They will rub on trees to get that living velvet off. And then their antlers will be nice and sharp and shiny. And of course, healthier animals have bigger antlers. Now I'm going to firm up this ear. It's important that they have good ears for hearing their predators like wolves. Now those eyes that can see really well at night. Again, they can see into the UV range. And their sight actually changes a bit during the year because it can be so bright in the summer and so dark in the winter. Their eyes have to change so that they can see in both of those types of light situations. Okay, now getting back to the neck. Now, this is a female, so she doesn't have a dewlap, but if this was a male, he'd have a kind of a fatter dewlap under his neck that would be big and fat and furrier. And then the upper part of the neck goes straight into that angle there of the withers. You might draw yours a little bigger. I think I made mine a little too flat. And then the belly. They don't really have an arch like a horse does where a saddle would fit very well, although reindeer have been raised and used for riding, not only pulling sleds like Santa's reindeer, but they don't have as good of a back for a saddle. Okay, now working on these legs. I know legs can be really intimidating because it's kind of hard to see. Well, let's start with this front right leg. And so the line of the neck is in front of that leg because it's farther away from us. So we've got a little bit of a bump in the middle of the leg for that angle of the wrist. That is actually their wrist. And the rest of the length of the leg is actually elongated wrist bones. And then down to the hoof, they are what's called a cloven hoofed animal. So they have two nails that go forward, and then they have two dew claws that are behind. Sort of like a cow actually has that too. And then the bottom of their feet actually has fur to help them get traction in the snow. So now this front left leg, we want to emphasize that shoulder area and then the angle of the wrist. And I could probably have my leg be bent a little bit more. I think I've got mine a little bit too straight, but that's okay. This animal's running and it's going to look a little bit different at any second because of its gait and how it's moving its legs. So that doesn't matter. And then I just sort of added those black hooves. I have other photographs on my website at the link in the comments where you can see the anatomy of the hoof a lot better. But those hooves have to adapt to being in the tundra in the summer that can be really wet and boggy, as well as the slippery and icy snow in the wintertime, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So now we've got the hip there and the joint of the knee that I just drew. So these guys have all the same bones that most other mammals have in their bodies. They're just a little bit different proportions. But unlike a horse that has one big hoof, these guys are the cloven-hoofed animals, which have two hoofs and then actually two dew claws as well. So now strengthening up the back of that leg and the angle of the ankle. I know this drawing from this photograph might seem a little challenging, but some of the other photographs are a lot more challenging. So I tried to get a really obvious, nice side view. And since we're trying to draw Rudolph, he would be running. Although, like I told you, Rudolph technically would have to be a female because all the depictions of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in movies and cartoons have him having antlers. And like I said, only the females keep their antlers all winter and then they drop them in the spring. And the males drop their antlers in the fall before the snow starts. So females use those antlers because they really need extra food because they're pregnant. And so they need extra food. So they really need to use those antlers all winter long to dig food out from under the snow. And also to protect them from predators like hungry wolves. Now there's a little oval that I'm drawing right there. That is a gland on their inner leg that is a scent gland, and they also will rub that scent gland on vegetation and tree trunks and shrubs to let other animals know that they've been by. Okay, so now I'm just adding the very last part before we move on to the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer sled and reindeer nose. I'm just adding this grass. So you can make any kind of grass you want. And if you're not happy about your hooves, and if you think they are not as realistic as you'd like, you can draw much longer grass to hide them. That's what I always did. When I was a kid, I used to love to draw horses, but I couldn't draw the hooves very well. So now we're going to move on, but I'll let you look at this for a moment. And then we're going to move on to adding the nose and the harness of the sleigh. And this is actually a real reindeer that lives in Lapland. And this is the real traditional sort of cover. But first, we're going to add the Rudolph's red nose. So I've got a red pencil here, and I'm going to make a big glowing nose. So his nose was very shiny nose, very glowing on those foggy Christmas Eve nights, like it might be tomorrow night. So we're trying to turn our reindeer into Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Now, if he was going to be pulling a sled, we need to add the harness of the sled. And so I'm just copying what we have here a little bit, but I'm going to make mine in the colors of Christmas, green and red. So there's going to be a part of the sled harness that goes around the neck to help them pull that heavy sleigh with all of your toys in it. And staying with the Christmas theme, I think I'm going to add some red bells, which are often on the sleigh so that all the little kids can hear Santa coming. And then you'll also notice there's another harness around behind their withers, kind of in the same place a horse's saddle would go with the harness that goes around their belly. So the same thing, I'm just going to draw that. And then add some red jingle bells. Now we're going to have to connect these two harnesses so they're stronger. So there's that horizontal line that is another leather strap that is connecting the harness that goes around the neck to the harness that goes around the belly. And we're going to do it above where the elbow is, because we don't want to get in the way of the Rudolph's elbow, so that he can run better and fly, of course. And then again, a few more circles for my red jingle bells. So now we have to add the parallel wooden structures that connect to the sleigh. And so I'm going to add those in sort of a brown color. And those are going back down towards the ground at sort of an angle. So just kind of thinking about how I'm going to do that. Just penciling that in really lightly. And darkening that up. That wood has to be really strong, because that's the only thing that connects the entire sleigh full of Christmas presents to the reindeer. Now I'm darkening that up so that you don't see through it. So it covers the belly and the legs. And then I'm going to add another one that you don't really see in this photo, but sometimes depending on the angle, you might see the other one, because there are a pair of these wooden poles that connect on either side of the reindeer. Okay, so just adding a little bit more details. I'm just going to darken up, adding a little bit more red and green to my harness to make it more festive in Christmas colors. And then there does have to be a little piece there that connects the pole. So I just added that little oval. In our photograph, it's the blue, I think, ribbons that are connecting. Okay, and so here's my finished version. So again, if you go to my website at christineelder.com/reindeer sketching tutorial, you'll find this photograph that you can download, as well as these other sketching photographs, but those additional tutorials that I've done in years past are actually inside my course. So I'm having a sale on all of my courses, 30% off. And the course you might be interested in, if you want to learn more about drawing reindeer, is my course called Sketching Mammals of the World. So if you go to my website at christineelder.com/courses, you can learn all about my courses. I actually have 21 courses. And I've got courses on every subject you could think of in the natural world. So I have courses on insects and other invertebrates. I have courses on flowers and plants. I have courses on fish, amphibians, birds, reptiles, and mammals. And inside the mammal course, there is a much more detailed drawing demonstrations from previous years that I have taught this, as well as a slideshow presentation that talks more about the biology of reindeer, because they're very fascinating. Reindeer have played such an important role in the native peoples of the far north for thousands of years. It's thought that reindeer have been domesticated for, I think, 7,000 years in northern Eurasia, and play a crucial role in the societies where they live. The reindeer and caribou, well, mainly reindeer, because reindeer are basically the domesticated smaller version of caribou. And we have caribou here in North America, up in Canada and Alaska. And so they've played such an important role. People have ridden them. They've raised them for milk and for meat and for their fur, to cover their houses. And so they've played such an important role, as much as a role that the alpacas and llamas played to the Incas, and camels played for the Egyptians long ago. So they've been really important, of course, as well as playing the role of Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, bravely carrying Santa's sleigh, flying through the air tomorrow night to bring all of you and your kids and your grandkids their toys on time. So we're really hoping that the weather stays mild. It's certainly mild here where I live in Oregon. It's pretty sunny today, actually. So we're hoping the weather stays mild for Santa's reindeer, so that they can continue to fly through the air and bring presents. So yeah, anyway, I'd love if you went over to my website at christineelder.com/courses, and you can get 30% discount on my courses right now. They make a wonderful gift because they are an online program, and they're self-paced. And when you're purchasing a course, you can actually click a checkbox to make it a gift. So if you need some last minute gift for people that enjoy wildlife and want to learn more about them, then you can get your course that you purchased sent directly to that person. And these courses are appropriate for adults as well as older kids that love nature. They also are helpful for environmental educators or people that live in or that work in zoos and aquariums and natural history museums, because as I did today, I talk a lot about the biology of the animal. And so in my mammal course, for example, we talk about mammals of the ocean and how they swim, like whales and dolphins. We talk about flying mammals like bats. We talk about mammals of all different habitats, like North American pronghorn antelope, which are related to reindeer, as well as all of the cool mammals of the African savannas. So anyway, I hope you check those out. And if you do follow along to this sketching tutorial, and here's another example of the drawing I demonstrate. If you follow along to the sketching tutorial, I would love it if you shared it online with your friends or shared it with me. You can always email me at my email address, which is hello@christineelder.com. And I'd love to see examples of your work. Teaching online like this can get a little bit lonely, just staring at my webcam and not seeing your beautiful faces in person. So I always love to know who follows my tutorials and how much they got out of it, and if they continued to finish their drawings. So like today, I just basically showed you, how to do the outline. But in other tutorials inside my course, I go into more detail on how to show the three-dimensional form of the animals, how to show the fur, Like here's another example of a previous reindeer sketching workshop I did that's inside my course, Sketching Mammals of the World. So I show you how to render this three-dimensional form and the fur. And here's another example where I showed the fur and the highlights and shadows with more detail. Okay, well, I got to get going. I got to do what probably a lot of you guys are doing is prepare for Christmas and Christmas dinner and wrapping presents. So I hope you really enjoyed learning a little bit about reindeer and Rudolph the reindeer. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. And I'll see you after the holidays. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.